I'm Kim Love-Hoskins and I'm in my third year of primary education.
And I'm Kieran Hawes. I'm a second year primary education student.
In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today.
This lesson has been designed to be implemented around halfway into an Earth Science unit for Year 3 students. We expect these students to have already engaged in learning of cyclic phenomena, such as the sun, moon and stars, as this allows them to not only build on and solidify their knowledge, but gives opportunity for the drawing out of similarities and differences. Looking at our lesson overview here, we can see our main inquiry question: how did Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples use and understand the sky? The second part of our inquiry question engages students to reflect on how different cultures perceive these phenomena. We've used our knowledge of the EDUC2090 framework to help guide us when creating this lesson plan by promoting an Indigenous standpoint that challenges and supports existing structures. We see this enhancing a strong sense of self-identity and pride for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students and provides non-Indigenous students with opportunities to understand and engage with material from non-dominant viewpoints. Looking at the content descriptors for Year 3 Science that we're working with during this lesson, we can see that we're engaging across the three strands: science understanding, science as a human endeavour, and science inquiry skills. Within these strands, and looking at the cross-curriculum priority of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures, the specific elaborations that we're engaging with include exploring how cultural stories of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples explain the cyclic phenomena involving the sun, moon and stars, and reflecting on how these may differ from contemporary science understandings, as well as researching how knowledge of astronomy has been used by some Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. This first elaboration will require some past learning, which is why we've set this lesson to be around the midway point of a unit. The second elaboration ties in really well with the resources that we've selected for this lesson, as they describe astronomy being used for means such as stories of creation, navigation, and seasonal awareness.
Approaching this lesson, we would expect students to have had previous exposure to the 8 Ways framework and a general understanding of Indigenous ways of knowing, being and doing. As this lesson is placed within an overarching Earth and Space Sciences unit, students will also have an understanding of contemporary ideas relating to the sun, the moon and the stars. This lesson aims to broaden students' knowledge of Indigenous ways of knowing, being and doing by investigating it in the context of astronomy. At the conclusion of these lessons, students should be able to describe ways that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples use the sky and stars within their communities. They will further be able to compare these uses with their knowledge of contemporary understandings. Students will also use practices within the 8 Ways framework to both research these concepts and present their findings. We have selected 3 resources to be used within this lesson: Brother Moon, a picture book; Star Stories of the Dreaming, a collection of dreaming stories related to Indigenous astronomy practices; and Aboriginal Astronomy, a short video detailing some of the ways that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples used astronomy in their life. Brother Moon is a picture book written by Wajagani woman Marie McCarthy Yolu and illustrated by Samantha Fry. It was published earlier this year by Magabala Books, an Indigenous publishing company. It tells the story of a young Indigenous boy who is introduced to astronomy practices by his grandfather, who teaches him the ways in which people can use the night sky to inform decision making. This is a valuable resource, providing a mirror for Indigenous students and a window for non-Indigenous students. As noted by Price, books as resources for Indigenous perspectives often fall short by not providing texts that Indigenous students can connect with. Star Stories of the Dreaming is a PDF study guide for Indigenous astronomy. It contains a collection of dreaming stories related to Indigenous astronomy practices. It was compiled as part of a Masters of Philosophy Indigenous Studies project and contains information from the Camila Roy and Uwaliwe peoples. Aboriginal Astronomy is a short video produced in 2018 that details the various ways in which Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples relied on astronomy in their daily lives. This video has been produced by NITV, or National Indigenous Television. The information is presented by Indigenous peoples who reflect on the practices of their cultures.
To introduce and hook the students into the lesson, we will start with reading and exploring the Brother Moon book. This modern and well-illustrated book is a powerful story that describes how the main character's grandfather uses phases of the moon when he goes hunting and fishing, and why it's important for us all to have an understanding of the natural world. After reading this, we will engage students in Think, Pair, Share activities for them to brainstorm and share their current knowledge of how Indigenous peoples use the sky and astronomy. Here, we want to lay the framework for the body of the lesson by discussing how Indigenous peoples used the sky for navigation, time-telling, weather, and dreamtime stories. While doing this, we will make connections to the star stories content by speaking of phenomena such as meteors, constellations, and planets. Doing this, we aim to build enthusiasm and wonder for the content to be explored in the body of the lesson. Moving into the body of the lesson, as a group, we're engaging with the Aboriginal astronomy video provided by NITV. This video scaffolds the students' activity by exploring the concepts of Aboriginal astronomy and making some connections to our content. It also uses some specific terminology that students can use to guide their research, which you can see we've listed here. From this video, we will then create some questions to guide the inquiry for students when exploring the content. Once we've adequately scaffolded for the students, we allocate them a star story and allow them to break off into small groups to read and extract information using the study guide. Each of these stories explores an Indigenous perspective about a specific phenomena in the sky and contains some informative text and supporting visual imagery. Students are to use the keywords in the inquiry questions we developed earlier to highlight important information from their star story.
To conclude the lesson, students will be brought together to reflect as a group. This lesson will entail a small discussion of findings among the students, encouraging them to think about how the ideas from the lesson compare to their prior learning about our sky, sun, and stars. It is important to reflect on the fact that the dreaming stories and video from this lesson do not represent the practices of all Indigenous communities, but these are the practices of a selection of communities. Moving on from this lesson, students will have the opportunity to conduct further research and present their findings in creative ways that align with the 8 Ways framework. This lesson employed an inquiry-based method of learning, using a constructivist method for students to create their own meaning of the materials. The 8 Ways framework further helps students to make meaning by engaging them in story sharing, land links, community links, and non-linear learning. By using authentic resources and acknowledging and experiencing traditional languages and names, students have more chances to meaningfully connect with the concepts. I quite enjoyed working on this assignment. Online studying has always been a bit of a challenge for me, but I thought that we navigated the hurdles of online collaboration quite well. We're both able to be really flexible and work well together. My concerns going forward are about not adequately teaching Indigenous perspectives. I haven't really had the opportunity to engage with Indigenous students up to this point in all my pracs. So I do have some concerns about my ability to teach Indigenous students and to teach those perspectives well. But I did take the time to reflect on the words of several presenters throughout the semester, saying that it's okay not to be perfect at it straight away and that there will be time to learn more and that it's okay to ask for help. I'm also very aware of the fact that there are many Indigenous cultures, and I'm concerned about being able to represent them all or give them enough weight within my classroom.
Reflecting on what I've learnt from this activity, my first point is how much information and depth and opportunity for investigation there is within content. For example, in future lessons, I could see students doing their own research of the specific group of Indigenous peoples that they explored in their star story. Could we further these activities where students are investigating these stories deeper and applying knowledge to other areas of the curriculum, such as mapping for geography or exploring timelines in maths? This ties into my second point, where it's important to ensure that students are engaged in learning. Currently on prac, I'm working with Year 3 students and find a lot of them struggling to stay on task and focused. How can I ensure that my activities allow this? My last point is ensuring that experiences are authentic and tie into Indigenous ways of knowing, learning, and doing. For example, is it better to use books and stories as opposed to delivering content through videos? Could we have created an authentic experience with this activity by engaging the community or allowing students to explore the night sky with a more knowledgeable other?
When we reflected as a pair, we came to a lot of the same conclusions. Our biggest problem with the lesson was that we had too many ideas and had to be really discerning of what made it into the lesson. As we designed it, we thought about the course content and what had made an impact with us and used those big impressions to guide us. It was really clear throughout this assignment that when planning lessons with Indigenous perspectives, that it's not just about accurate content, it's also incredibly important to make sure that the information is presented in a respectful and empathetic way. Overall, we found this to be a valuable experience that will influence our future teaching.